frankly, that's not necessarily the objective. The objective is that the internal auditor is able to highlight, constructively challenge, and then take that on board and the company benefits, because internal audit is a very powerful management tool, performance enhancement tool, and that needs to be appreciated. The third I think I want to highlight is that the CEOs must be concerned not only about performance gap, but also about opportunity gap. To me, it's a very important distinction. It's only internal audit in the process of going through the business and assessing can highlight to you that if you have budgeted for 12% and if you have achieved 9%, due to whatever reason, that's a performance gap. They can tell you, these are the reason, this is the organizational pathology that we have observed, which needs to be really sorted out. But it is also them who can tell you, your 12% ab initio is not the right target. Your objective should have been 17%. The fact that you have really lowballed and working at 12%, you are actually, there is an opportunity gap of 5%. This is something which they can very often highlight to you. Other enough examples could be there. I'm sure in your own life you would have really observed it. For this to be achieved, I believe internal auditors must have business intimacy. This is a very important point for me, that the internal auditors must not be some office tigers and paper tigers. They need to understand what the business processes are, the building blocks in the business are, how the customer service function works, how the supply chain function is organized, what is the value chain, who is sharing the value in this chain in totality, there is an appreciation. As much as a CFO needs to have an enormous amount of business intimacy and business knowledge, an internal auditor, a chief internal auditor needs to have that business intimacy and knowledge. That's the only way he can really perform, he or she can perform that function very well. That takes me to a very important point CEO on the board must really bear in mind. This I have always feel at some times or other peeved about it, that internal audit very often is an outstanding ground for grooming some of your highly talented management. Internal audit function needs to be used to pass some of your high quality talent through that function to get a finer, larger appreciation, general management appreciation of the business. Sometimes I have seen that internal audit is seen as a parking ground. That is something a CEO for his own benefit must resist. Because it is very important that, therefore, sometimes you may have to really sort of give people 3 years stint in internal audit. We used to do it in HUL. Some of our brightest boys and girls, we passed them through internal audit. They spent 3-4 years in internal audit and moved on to do better things. Later on, we also experimented with bringing specialist functions into internal audit. We had a marketeer as an internal auditor. He really focused on marketing, brand spending, and brand management, and so on and so forth, was able to add significant value. We had supply chain chaps really brought on to internal audit function, and who really did this internal audit work as a supply chain person. But one of the challenges was to really give them further career opportunities, because very often they were reluctant to come into internal audit. They said that what will I do afterwards? So therefore, we need to ensure that they will really go, the next career opportunity for them will be a better one, is something which we have to reassure them. So therefore, it is important that the internal audit is really sort of staffed with adequate specialists as well. It's very, very essential. And the other last point perhaps I just need to make before we move on to others and question answer. A CEO needs internal audit in good times and bad times. Now, I have always believed success always brings the shadow of failure along with it. Because when an organization is very successful, that is where people tend to lose the sense of risk management. They think there is a sense of alchemy prevalent. Profligacy is very high. Risk appetite goes up enormously. And it is the internal auditor who, with a steady head, can do the function day in and day out and really tell the management and show them the mirror regularly. It is very important, therefore, for a CEO to have a very high quality, courageous internal auditor who is not really silenced by the sound of success all around him, but to understand and really say that, look, there are issues in the business for a sustained performance. Please understand these issues have got to be attended to. And there are examples also on that. So these are the few observations from a CEO perspective that I just wanted to share with you this evening. And thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Sundaram. Mario, from the eyes of an internal audit head.
At the outset, I must confess that I have not been in internal audit through my career. It's only in the latter years that I have been in internal audit, having moved through the business. So what I will be discussing are things that we have done to raise the quality level of internal audit. And of course, there are certain situations which I inherited, which I was very fortunate to inherit. To start with, we have kept as our guiding principle the fact that quality, which is what we are talking about, is never the result of an accident. It is something that has to be premeditated, and you have to work strong towards it. What also happens is that you don't just say you're going to do your best, but you have to work towards it. Now, having said that, let me put this entire thing in a context, and that context is what really is the mission statement of any internal audit department. I won't dwell too much on it because we heard it in the morning, that we have to be a proactive body, that we have to assist the management and the board of directors and the audit committees to add value to all the stakeholders. Which then brings me to the first point. To whom should internal audit report? I'm not going to be drawn into a controversy whether it should be the chairman of the audit committee. I know we have two here. Whether it should be a non-executive chairman of the board, whether it should be the group chairman, whether it should be all, both, whatever. But suffice it would to say that I see around me several companies, I'm not talking of the Mahindra Group, but there are several companies where for whatever reason, internal audit is made to report to the CFO, to an executive, to the managing director. And I can tell you by experience that I don't think this is a very good practice. At the end of the day, there's a lot of compromise which has to happen because of this kind of a setup. So I think this is something that needs to be addressed. Should the internal audit function be done through an in-house team? Should it be done through an outsourced team? Should it be a mix of both, or what? I would actually vote for a structure where it is not just a mix of both, but where you also get subject matter specialists coming in from within the company so that they're able to do short-term stints of internal audit in matters of their expertise. What I would also advocate is a defined rotation policy for those in internal audit as well as the outsourced teams. Of course, those who want to stay on forever is fine, but then there also then has to be a rotation so that you don't get stuck, you don't dig your heels into any one particular area. For the businesses coming under the umbrella of a group, I would definitely advocate a centralized internal audit function. And I'm saying this because from the perspective of those on the audit committees, one gets assured of quality which gets driven at a centralized level. We know that we are as good as the resources we have. Unfortunately, internal audit is not a subject which is covered in any depth in any postgraduate qualification or any professional course in India. We know that internal audit is not the department of choice. We've just spoken about it. Speaking of myself personally, when I was joining the Mahindra Group, I was offered internal audit. And you know what my answer was. It was a clear no. Today, of course, I'm enjoying internal audit. And I don't know how many more people within the group are enjoying my being there, but I'm there. Internal audit is not also a department where people want to stay on for too long, because for whatever reason they see it as a, would I say dead end? No, that's not the right word. But people see it as something that does not have a future. That's an occupational hazard, and we have to learn to live with it. And therefore, in all this, training has to be center stage. We have alluded to this so often during the course of today. There is a big risk, I see, that internal auditors have this superiority complex of being know-alls, even if they do not get themselves reskilled or upskilled as they go along. They believe they can handle any topic and then come out with whatever observations they want to without much of depth. That's something that needs to be controlled. And it could come out, it could get rectified through CPERs. I know the institute, I know that the Bombay chapter has got a lot of initiatives now towards training, and I really welcome them. Yeah. We found that quality also comes from the kind of topics that get selected for audit. And what I like to follow is what I call the brace concept, brace, because I've always said that internal audit is a brace or a support to management. And therefore, I believe that topics that get covered should be balanced, should be relevant, should be achievable, should be challenging, and should result in an even flow of work throughout the year. You know, sometimes I say very jokingly that we're not required in April because everybody is getting ready with the statutory accounts, and in May also. In June, they're getting ready with catching up. July is first quarter closing. In August, people go on leave. September, you're getting ready for second quarter, and now comes the VAT audit and so on. October, half-yearly closing. November, Diwali holidays. December, you can come for a short while. January, third quarter. February, come if you want. March, sorry, we are closed. Which hardly leaves any time. So I think that's something that maybe we have to get over, and we've got to find ways and means of it. Just two very quick points more. Several times I've seen eyebrows being raised at audit committees because report presentation is poor. This morning we spoke about a 126-page report. Whether a 5-page report is good, whether a 20-page report is good, I don't think that's the point. The point is, does the report talk of the significant areas? Does it do a proper rating? Does it do a proper grading? And does it highlight the root cause? And finally, you get to see your quality through the lens of an auditee evaluation questionnaire. And I would dare say, if you're really very brave, you should get a peer review done so you'll see where you stand. Thank you.
Thank you, Mario. Thank you. Mr. Ghosh?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Burzan. But did you observe something? You have arranged sitting arrangements that we are internal audit practitioners and they are. So, but anyway, I'll take the cue from what Mr. Sundaram was talking about, seeing it from the CEO's perspective. And I would share with you, I also came from finance area or commercial, and then came to internal audit and realized that that was the time when it was evolving. And I was lucky, I was in Tata Group. That certainly is one of the, shall I say, enlightened group, where I could take up issues and say that you have to consider internal audit to have a look at these areas. Like what Mr. Sundaram was saying, that finding out to give the CEO or the senior management an avenue for opportunity using the services of internal audit. And I think I consider that certainly helped in, shall I say, changing or at least easing their resistance against internal audit, looking at all the areas. Now, while doing this, one thing that reflected in me was when I was to assess others, I certainly needed, and I thought that I need to do an assessment of what we are doing. And when I did this, this was in 2005, when not many people thought about that. And when I did this and I took it up again, I had the opportunity of being in a company where the vice chairman was again from Hindustan Levers, who was again considering that internal audit is not a dumping ground, but it could be a good training ground. So I got the help from the board to select people who were certainly not the rejects, but were on the fast track. So those were selected, and then I said that we need to have a team which can be assessed, and we got this assessment done by an external assessor. And first, of course, we did it with the auditee giving us feedback. Of course, it's a common practice today, and we got that evaluation of our work done by the auditees as well as by an external audit firm, which gave us an opportunity of identifying the gaps. Now, when I'm sitting and today talking about asking people to practice quality assessment, and that's what my role today in this panel is, that I lead the internal audit, assessment or quality assessment group for IIA, Bombay chapter. And I think it is certainly a good practice. And I'll tell you why, because as it is defined, I'll just take a minute to, I had jotted down something outside. Quality assurance is for providing stakeholders of internal audit service assurance that internal audit is performing according to certain standards. This is something which I coined. And then, in other words, be perceived, internal audit be perceived by the stakeholders as adding value and improving the operations of the organization. These are taken from some parts of the definition, etc. But this is the purpose for which an assessment, quality assessment, needs to be done. If you have any other opinion, please do add. But this is something which I thought were necessary. And quality assurance following the standards mainly deal with three elements. They are to be found in the definition of internal audit, which specifies what is expected of the internal audit service. The second is code of ethics. And each